Welcome back to Raised by Giants live discussion. Welcome everyone in the chat. We're starting a little early here today. Good to see you guys and any moderators and channel members out there. A reminder that super chats and super stickers are available and are a great way to help support the show and also get any of your questions answered. If you send in a super chat with a question for me or for my guests, I will be sure to get that question answered. Ryder Ranger channel memberships are also available and are a great way to help support the show monthly for as much as a cup of coffee per month. A new channel members only episode will be dropping tomorrow, Friday, April 5th, and will be titled Riding the Waves of Deception. If you're already a channel member, it should pop up in your feed. If you're not a channel member, keep track of the community tab page on the channel and become a Ryder Ranger channel member today. You're not going to want to miss tomorrow's channel members exclusive. Trust me. So with that down, we have the creator of Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube. A warm welcome back to the show. Good friend of the show, David DuByne. How's it going, my friend?
Hey, thanks for having me back. Yeah, there's so much going on. It's hard to even know where to start.
Well, how's your travels been, my friend? I presume not so well since yesterday. You were in Taiwan during the strongest earthquake to hit in 25 years.
Yeah, we're really far down south. So for us here, it was like a 4-point plus quake. But further north, it's a different story up there. Now, I can report that, after the quakes here, just the standard operating procedure is everything shuts down. Airports shut down because they need to see if there's any cracks out on the runways. So then all flights are halted for a minute. Train services, they're all halted also because they're checking the tracks. The electric went out on the bullet train, so a lot of people got stranded yesterday. The electric's back up, and I did see a bullet train moving today. So I know that at least on this part of the island, the bullet train service is back up and running. On the east side of the island, not so much. There were so many landslides and just tremendous damage over there. I don't know if you've seen any of the pictures of the just incredible sized boulders that rolled down hills and just smashed through cars and things. The thrust of it was more to like the north and to the west, and all of that. There's an area called Hualien that's on the east coast, and that really took the brunt of the damage over there. Taipei in the main city, it was like a fall off the build, a raining debris fest in the city, like tiles were falling down, and then the further you got toward the quake center was just larger and larger things collapsing, buildings, smokestacks, that sort of thing. But being down here in the southern part, it felt that first big one. It was like I say, it was in the morning, and then it felt that aftershock probably like 20 minutes later. Another one. I was like, damn, this thing is getting big. But for us, it wasn't like terrifying or anything, because I've been through that was about the largest one. I've been through one larger than that. Was like a 5-point when I was living here before. It's like an earthquake prone island. So the west part, it's starting again. Things are coming back. They opened the airport back up. Like I say, train services are running on the west part of the island. On the east part of the island, everything's suspended still. I was just even in Taipei City, they have an above ground part of what you consider the MRT or the subway system. It's called the Brown Line. Like that one on the above ground raised track, it kind of like split in several places. So the track's just on it disconnected. It's very much like Bangkok with that above ground train, but the section's separated. So that's offline for a minute until they can get that fixed. It's just the amount of damage, and even in the way it thrust and shook the whole north part of the island. Just it's going to take a minute to come back from that. So systems are coming back online. Trains are running again. Airports open again. That's my Morse code alert there. So
it's getting you around the door ringer. Was this an expected earthquake? Because I didn't know about this until you told me about it yesterday before we were doing this show. Was this something that was expected and something that was warned about before, or did it come unexpectedly?
Yeah, Dutch sense can predict some of the earthquakes, but really the earthquake prediction comes down to the solar activity or, space weather. And then also, depending, you can watch Dutch sense. It talks about the asthenosphere and different movements far down, 600 miles below us, and how that can move, and then where there's buildups of pressure, etc. So the earthquake forecasting is not where it could or should be right now in terms of sciences to predict it down into like a day, a week, a month, an hour. But there's generalities in it, and normally, since we had that large CME pop off the sun that was arriving around today or so, you just have to wonder if that was really connected to it. And one thing I just don't understand still is our USGS, which is the United States Geological Survey Service, or whatever you like to term that, USGS. They downgrade almost every quake that arrives that's over 6. Now, this one was originally on the original readings from the USGS was 7.5. They took it down to 7.2. But over here, the Japan Meteorological Association, the JMA, raised it to a 7.7. Now, that's a huge disconnect between the two agencies, one downgrading, one upgrading. But I'll say that routinely, anybody out there who would follow larger quakes over 6, USGS always downgrades. And I'm asking like a serious question. They downgrade at least 90% of the quakes that are over 6.0. So what's wrong with their software that's running where they need to continuously downgrade quakes? Is it that their software is broken and they haven't updated it and they need to really do a system update? Because it's been like that for years now, plural, that they're downgrading almost all over 6 earthquakes? Or is it that they're trying to hide and mask the increase in magnitude that would be visible on any kind of bar chart? Because then for you and me, looking at cycles and solar activity, knowing that larger quakes are inbound, more, stronger winds, these kind of earth changes are coming in that would be a result of changes not only in our local solar system, but further afield as well. Like that would be a known quantifiable for what we'd expect in the change coming this grand solar minimum, heavier, powerful, more cooling cycles, something like this would be measurable. And are they trying to stop that measurable, that one, variable that could also prove something's in change right now? And I'm asking myself the question, and maybe somebody out there has the answer as to why they continuously downgrade, why they don't have any, new workings on their algorithms, and then are they hiding something at the same time with the magnitude of the quakes? So maybe that's 3 questions, not 1. My bad. Early for me, so I can't count anymore from 1 to 3.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here, even though it's super late where you are. Always appreciate what I've seen is from a lot of the outlets, CNN, NBC, and all them, they're seeing that it was a 7.4 magnitude quake. And you said the original from Taiwan. What was the original magnitude that they said that it was, that they upgraded to?
7.5. And then JMA pushed it up to a 7.7, and then USGS downgraded to 7.2. Now, what you're seeing from CNN and BBC was near the original readings that came away from the Taiwan Bureau over here. They have also a seismological arm of the meteorological bureau that you can find the weather and that sort of thing from. So they're taking the original readings that came from here, but if you go to the USGS and take a look, they've downgraded that since down to 7.2. So the numbers are all open. They're all over 7, but it's still the difference between a 7.7 and a 7.2 is the amount of damage we've seen here. This is a very large, very damaging quake. Like there's a huge amount of damage. And you should have seen the landslides, like the pictures of the landslides. It's just like, what? Every hill landslid. And then you look at Turtle Island, which was offshore, and because it's got a rounded island to it, and there's almost vertical cliff face where the head would come off, and it looks like a turtle from the air basically. But where the head is, another whole section of that cliff face dropped off into the ocean. So it was that strong to break off part of an island. Like, put that into perspective for a second. It was strong enough to break off part of an island and send it into the sea. Yet they want to put it as 7.2. It makes no sense to me. Why they wouldn't come and just say this was a very powerful one? They said, okay, let it be known. Oh wait, when you're doing the charts and you're measuring it up, like, wait, that's a 6, 7, 7 in the last 12 months. That's double the average, you know. Then you can start to see some causation, like what's driving that. Because I never want to let you go back to solar activity as a driver for anything, because it upsets the global warming narrative. Everything is to stop any type of discussion unless it's CO2. Now, if you can directly correlate earthquakes with, you know, solar activity, then we need to start correlating what we're seeing with our weather changes with solar activity too. And they never, ever, ever want to go there. So I think, you know, one's pat and the other one's back, because they're all reliant on funding from the government. So I'll leave it there.
Was there any tsunami warnings after this quake, or because that's really
Yeah, it was 10 foot. It was 10 foot. That was the warning, but it never manifested because the way it thrust. So when the plate, you can get different thrusts in different positions. Like if it thrusted down in our direction, we would have got a brunt of the 6+ down south here more. But the way it thrust, it went to the north and the west. So that wave action was going up toward Japan. So they put out a tsunami warning of up to 10 foot. They evacuated the coast, everything blaring, sirens, everything was just off the Richter in Japan, because they were expecting a 10-foot tsunami from this one, and it just didn't manifest. It came in, but it was much smaller than they anticipated. It was a couple feet.
That's good. I'm glad that there wasn't a giant tsunami that followed that, because normally with that giant of a quake, there's normally a tsunami to follow.
Yeah, and it was just it was offshore too, just barely offshore. But yeah, Japan immediately, because they understood, like that time you got 20, 25 minutes maximum before it starts rolling up there. So you're talking about 500 miles an hour. So by the time the quake hit and you're going about 250 miles up there, you know, you're 25 minutes, 20, between 20 and 30, and then that waves on the shore. So the amount of terror up there, people scrambling to get to higher ground too in Japan after that was just, you should have seen the videos too. People like crawling, screaming, scraping up the hill, just like trying to get anything. People running for their lives, literally. Like they just, because after what happened up there with their quake, and they saw the massive tsunamis, and we saw that just insane footage up there, they were thinking something similar was coming at a 10-foot level, where it might even get higher in some areas where, you know, coastal areas can pile up on themselves. So you could get a larger, it might be 10 foot on the average, but there's some areas with tidal flows that could be, you know, 16, 18 feet, which, you know, people are running at that point. So luckily nothing happened like that. And even here next, a bunch of water sloshed back into the harbors and thing, but it didn't like over and, you know, and inundate coastal, like the barriers that they have out here for typhoons and stuff. It didn't come over that and do much. It just, the harbor had a bunch of waves, and all the harbors coming in, and the water level rose slightly, but it wasn't like quote unquote a tsunami. Luckily, that was just the luck of the draw that it didn't do that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And of course, our thoughts is with the people in Taiwan, that their families are reunited and the people that are missing are found. And I don't mean to move on here too quickly, but we have a lot.
No, please move on. That's really all I have to report is everything's getting back to normal in other parts of the island, but Hualien is just going to be off for quite some time, which means it cuts the whole. So when you look at Taiwan, there's a huge mountain range going down the center of it. You know, those peaks are, you know, 12,000 feet. And you go over to the right or to the east of that, and then you got a whole set of highways and trains and lines coming down that's all cut off. So that whole part of you're going to have to go all the way back down around the island that come up from the bottom to get to areas, instead of just making that straight shot. Now, or if you're the inverse, where if you're the bottom, you have to come all the way around and then they come all the way back down from the top down from, you know, Jilin port area or something. So it cut off that whole part of the island is going to be cut off for quite some time. I'm not going to conjecture, it won't be years, but it'll definitely be multiple months where, yeah, the roads are going to take they're going to take a little bit of time. The amount of landslides was just tremendous. And the bridge is separated, you know, like when you have a bridge and it reconnects to the bank, like those, whatever the bolts were there, whatever, just a bunch of it snapped, and the bridges are off by several feet hanging over that way. Maybe they can like nestle and jostle them back in place, and roads are cracked, and it's just, all the water mains are broken, natural gas stuff. They had to turn all that off. Like the amount of buildings collapsing, falling off their foundations and just falling over. And then almost every building was damaged over there. So it'll be a minute just even to get the infrastructure up. And this is another weird thing is it's a holiday right here now. There was a huge amount of people up cruising around on holiday time. And then when the landslides came down every single valley, so people are all trapped still up there in between the landslides. Like their cars are there. They can't really get out. So you got thousands of people trying to call 911, equivalent of 911, 110 here. And like some of the phone towers, they only had battery backup, and the battery backup's already off because the power turned off. So there's battery backup for 12 hours in some places. 36 hours is the longest battery backup that I know of. And once the power's out, so people, the towers, literally the battery backup after 12 to 24 hours, it's not working anymore. The batteries are out because they're not recharging because the whole entire electrical system's out. So people are stuck in the mountains trying to call for help, but they can't because the repeaters out there, where what you consider a mobile tower. And they're just like, we need help. And well, yeah, you and the other 10,000 people stuck up in the mountains. They're not dead, but they're just like, we don't have any food, we don't have any water, we need help. We got grandma with us, she can't walk out. And we're, it was one of those kind of things ongoing right now. So it's a bit, but that's on that side of the island. So it's a bit interesting to see it play out on the news when it's just like right over there, literally just right over there. But there's very little help or very little thing you can do except, they're coming in with machines, just trying to quickly scrape all the boulders off the road and just drop them over off the, just keep them going downhill. They'll clean it up later. They just need to get, some emergency equipment in there as quickly as they can. So like all hands on deck to scrape stuff off the roads. The dozers are all up over the place, just scraping stuff off the road. We'll worry about repairing the roads later. We just need to get them open so we can move equipment up and around there. So it'll be another week before they get everybody out of the mountains.
Are you going to be able to get out of Taiwan? You're going to be able
Oh,
to
yeah. Everything's back
there?
open
Okay.
on this side of the island. We're on the west side over here.
Good deal. Well, speaking of bridges, we had the on March 26th, 2024, the Baltimore Key Bridge collapse after ship collision. And we were talking about this, and what does this mean for like distribution? And because you were mentioning that this area is used to ship a lot of machinery and a lot of big machinery. So what does this mean for distribution?
Well, anybody can do their own research on this. And it's with agriculture. It's with agricultural machinery. That's the big thing. Inbound and outbound. And also fertilizer. It's the second largest unloading port in America for fertilizer. Now, keep in mind also it's the second largest outbound port for coal exports. Now, you look at that and you go, this World Economic Forum has been talking ad nauseum to cut agriculture and cut coal, and then this does both in one place. Okay, but China's not playing the game. China's opening a new coal burning power plant two of them every single week are opening. India's, going on very much the same. I think it's like one every week and a half. They're not playing the game. They're just saying no. Because what I'm finding out here traveling around is the rest of the world is firewalling the West off. Like you go play with your silliness and like live with no energy and put your citizens back in serfdom and decline your lifestyles and live a degraded life and into a pauper, more impoverished state. We just came out of that. We're not going back into that. No, thank you. We get overthrown if we go back that direction. The reason we still stay in power is because we're moving like you guys did. And people get, the white picket fence and a washing machine and a car and everybody happy. They're not going back that direction. So just please understand, if you're listening to this, we in the West are being firewalled off from the rest of the planet. We're going to exist in our little degraded Marxist ecosystem over here of all these Western Five Eyes nations in collapse phase, along with Europe, while the rest of the planet over here spins and goes, we're going to operate under gold-backed currency. We're going to set up tokenized assets and swap between ourselves. They already got the parallel system up and running already. It's called BRICS Pay, and it's an equivalent to the SWIFT system, and it's already live where they're trading native currencies, which means like India can trade with, I don't know, Saudi Arabia directly. They don't need to use dollars anymore. Like that's live right now. And the next step they're doing, and what you're going to start hearing about, is something called real world assets, where they can tokenize the value of, like, let's say a coal shipment. They can put it on the blockchain as a certain value to it. And then that can be traded as a value amongst partners as well. And then once that's traded or paid for that, then this is already on a ship. They can just go deliver it somewhere as payment in full. So if, like, let's say I owe you $1 million, right? Let's say I owe you $1 million, and then, okay, that shipment of coal is out there, it's tokenized and it's on the blockchain and it's worth $1 million. I could just transfer it to you, and you'll say, yeah, I'll take the payment for $1 million in coal, and then that ship's ready to go and it delivers to your port. Like that's the way they're operating, literally trading commodities to settle debts. They're firewalling off. $0 go through that system. And the other 80% of the planet wants nothing to do with what we're doing out here. This is the future. They're telling their citizens to buy gold. And we're sitting back here with collapsed bridges that are going to, I don't know if you saw the underwater sonar that they just came up with, the images there. They don't know how to clear that thing. And then I'm thinking, well, you don't know how to clear it. We're coming into planting season. Do you think our nation needs fertilizer? Now, I know a lot of farmers have already seasoned their fields and they're pre-planting and they're plowing, they're tilling, they're doing the tilling, the fertilizer, and they call it seasoning. And they like do all this work at the same time that they're disking the fields. Now that application that goes down in first plant there, okay, that's already taken care of because they had to pre-buy all that last year. But when it comes into somewhere like middle July, when they're going to run a second application of fertilizer on there, what if it's not there? Because you can only divert so much. You can only divert so much. Because unbeknownst to me, I started to do more research into this. The same rail routes that run the automobiles down to Baltimore to export. And by the way, Baltimore exports 850,000 cars and trucks per year of just light utility, what you consider a car and a pickup truck. 850,000 per year go out of Baltimore. So those rail routes that are set from the auto manufacturers are the same routes that take that fertilizer up into the Midwest. So it'll land somewhere up in Ohio or Michigan, Indiana, and then it'll get on a feeder route and then head where it really needs to. Now, those are established trunk lines that are set for that breakbulk cargo, and they have different times for the routes, and the train lengths are set, and they're running a really tight schedule between trains on that. Now, if you're going to redivert that, well, they want to try to take it down into Savannah. Going from Savannah up into Ohio, you got to run a whole bunch of different routes and you're going to be flipping tracks a lot, and that's just cumbersome. Ever since a lot of the train derailments, the teams and the crews, they're just not there anymore. I mean, everything's shrunken down. The unions, a huge amount of people retired, and the crews and the teams, that's just the guys running the trains, the guys doing maintenance, stacking the cars, locking them together. And then, of course, you got anybody who's involved with the movement of that train. And that's all shrinking. So there's less and less people to facilitate this type of, and there's more derailments, and the lengths of the trains need to be smaller now because they're worried about the derailments. So you have to quote me on how many cars they've shortened the trains on. So you can't just reroute 100% of things in like a snap of a finger. Yeah, you're taking part of that was Baltimore trunk line going to the Midwest for fertilizer, and you're going to try to bring it in down at Houston or Savannah or New York and try to get it to the same place on time. They can reroute some, but they can't reroute all. That's the problem. And the coal outbound also, like And the autos outbound also. This is a tremendous, tremendous bottleneck here for anything that we're exporting or importing into the U.S. And tell me, what did you see? You're back home there. Like, I'm out of that news loop right now. So what are you seeing about the bridge in terms of like how fast is it going to get repaired, or more just cleaned up first so they can open the shipping channel? Are you hearing any new news on that?
Well, immediately, soon as this happened, it reminded me of the Evergreen ship in 2021. You remember the Evergreen
I do.
ship that got stuck in the canal? It's almost identical, dude. I was like, what is this? I was like, this is almost the same type of thing. It's like these events are just repeating over and over again, and it's really wild. And I think people forgot about this Evergreen ship getting stuck in the canal, because I don't think that we've really felt all of the ramifications of this yet either, and we probably won't feel the ramifications of the Baltimore ship um, ramming into the bridge for a while either. So I just thought that that was really interesting, that it's so similar to the Evergreen ship that got stuck just what was that, 3 years ago, almost.
Yeah. What if Baltimore stays closed for a couple of years? You know, like this year right now with fertilizer imports into America. Yeah, farmers already have most of what they need for planting season. It's going to come into mid-season when they need the NPK, and then like the very last application at the end of the summer. Like that'll be affected more than right now. But what if they can't get that open until next year? You might think, wow, we got a lot of train tracks. Yeah, but they're completely full, because I know a guy who is responsible for contract growers where they literally go out to these farms, 10,000 acre farms, and be like, you grow your corn, we buy it all. We're going to ship it to California. So he's always trying to get extra rail space, and they even forward buy like 2-3 years out for capacity on the rails. And he's like, there's not even a single extra car out there available right now, not even one extra car. He's like, we can't even pay a premium to get extra space. They just tell us no. There's no space. Everything is chock-a-block, completely full. So everything, well, they'll just load up an extra, snap some cars, and they'll do an extra. The timing is so tight on the tracks right now. It's unbelievable. It's almost, it's a crisis in America. We really need to do something with the railroads right now. If you're talking about infrastructure, that's national security, that's crumbling, that would be one thing to look at first.
Yeah, and if they take out the shipping, they make it hard to import things, then it would go to train. Then if something happens to the trains, then we're kind of stuck.
You could get it, but you're gonna have to run it by road, and whoa, you talk about a cost jump on that. You're gonna feel it immediately in the pocketbook. If they need to start running fertilizer by truck to get it to where that needs to go, oh, your food prices would double easily without even blinking, double. Because you can't grow it without the fertilizers. That's the whole thing today. Like, our soils are so unhealthy. They're like dead soils, literally. The only reason you can grow something in them is because we put fertilizer on them. And if you don't apply the fertilizer, your yields are going to be just knocked back tremendously. So, put that into perspective for a second. If this bridge, a lot of people, I can't confirm, was it an accident? Was it not? I'm just saying, it was the perfect place to knock down American agriculture also by limiting or restricting the flow of fertilizer into the United States. Right during planting season, which again, the knock on comes in to say July, they'll reapply again. Will there be enough for everybody? That's the question.
It feels like when you think of all this stuff and all the things that are happening, it seems like they're going after one thing at a time. Do you remember the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio last year?
One of like 100 that occurred that several months.
And I don't think
wasn't the only one, I assure you. There were like dozens of other very, very high profile ones that would have made the news and been the number one story, but East Palestine at that magnitude and level, just they didn't really report on it because it was like a little smaller one. But there were hundreds of train derailments after that, hundreds. But regional news would only report on it because it wasn't an East Palestine fire one with the chlorides and thing.
It's just interesting how it's ships, trains. It's like they're hitting all of our transportation.
Yeah, and the transportation that's involved in mainly agriculture, or they're damaging agriculture areas because East Palestine, a lot of the area in Ohio that was had the fallout come on it should be offline now. Now, is it, or is it poisoning the food supply? And that's a very real question. It's a very valid question. The uptake from the roots into your, kernels of corn, for example. That would be a toxic. It should be like another love canal area there. There should be nothing grown on that soil, but it is. So buyer beware.
Yep, we got the trains, we got the planes. The only thing that I can think that happened with planes was that of recent time was that lady on the plane. You know which lady I'm talking about? That person up there isn't real. That became the meme. So that's the only thing I can think of that happened with the plane recently. And you have the train deer.
Oh well, every time you look, there's another Boeing, something that has to emergency land. I mean, every several days now, you're finding another part of the jet fell off while it was in the sky. The aircraft was damaged. The emergency landing. That's just been an ongoing theme for like months now. They're trying to scare people out of the skies.
Then you had the submarine as well, the submarine that exploded. So they're hitting all of these. I don't really know what to make of it. I don't really have too much to say on it, but that they're hitting all the transportation things. Like they're making these big stories about all the major transportation routes in the past 3 years. They've been hitting them all hard.
Yeah, and a lot of focus is on the agricultural end of things too, because if you could just dovetail into that, like the amount of fires in the production facilities. And I saw just today somewhere in Texas they're going to cull, I don't know how many millions of birds because they found one case of quote unquote bird flu in there. So the price of your eggs is going to rise. So the total amount. This is the largest company in America that produces eggs. They're going to reduce their output 2%. So, will it affect egg prices? I'm curious to see, a 2% reduction in the major egg supplier in America. How much would that tweak your egg price? At 2% up? Is it measurable on a 2% decline in production? It's going to take a minute for that to come back. You got chickens, you're looking at a good 4 months for that. I'm sure their flocks are always, they're just like rotating flock all the time, but still. Take out that many millions of birds and then come back. It's going to take a minute to bring that back up. Anybody out there, get your calculators. Hey, keep it handy. And if you see any price rises, please let Ryder and myself know, because that'd be interesting, because we could put a direct correlation to it then, or start getting a better gauge of a price or a reduction in output on this particular agricultural commodity will raise the price this much. That's a good case study to look at.
Eggs are already super expensive. They're $6 for a dozen where I am. So it's like it's just keeps going up. It's not going down at all. They're just getting more expensive.
Yeah, at what point do people just just stop buying the product, but B, get angry enough that that's a base ingredient they need for almost anything. Even if you want to make your own bread at home, you're going to need an egg. If you're going to make anything, a cake by yourself or whatever. A lot of people, and I encourage people to learn how to bake at home to save money. Like, you're spending how much on a loaf of bread? $6, $8 when you go out for an artesian loaf. You can make that same artesian loaf in your oven for like 50 cents if you know how to make bread at home. But a lot of the recipes call for an egg in there. And especially with some of those like more artesian ones, you need to do the egg, you need to brush the egg on top to get that sort of brownish, that nice finished brown on the top. And cakes too, you can't make a cake without an egg. Come on. And then look at the protein, and again look at if you're going to be a fighting age male to resist something in America, you're going to need protein. Now look what they're trying to wipe out. Okay, eggs go away, meats are going away. You know, healthy, viable, vital men that are a force for good to protect not only their families but their communities need protein. And look where they're going after. They're going after all the protein. I've noticed that as a thing where protein seems to be way more expensive, so people are cutting back on it because they can't afford it. So less protein makes you less of a force to contend with. And again, maybe I'm reading too much into that. Maybe not. I don't know.
Well, we have another thing to cover here today, Dave, and I think it's important to talk about, and that is the solar eclipse. The solar ellipse, as the NASA representative calls it. Did you hear that? He called it the solar ellipse, not the
That was
eclipse.
probably hidden. That was a hidden meaning that they let go on purpose. Those kind of gaffes don't happen. That was a purposeful let out with that ellipse. Then, so how you read into it, whatever you want to read into it, but you know, at those higher levels, those gaffes or those mistakes are not. They're not mistakes. They're on purpose. Just trust me on that one.
Okay, well, I have the clip here that I'm going to play for us and let us lead us into the discussion.
Yeah, I'd like to
about
watch that if you don't mind.
The solar ellipse.
He from the south, ain't he?
But a reminder that this is covered under fair use under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. And that is what me and Dave here is going to be commenting on, is this NASA conference about the solar eclipse. Here it is. Let me get that banner up real quick. There we are. Okay, start it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Acting NASA Press Secretary Faith Mackey, and thank you for joining us this morning as we look forward to the upcoming total solar eclipse on April 8th. During today's press conference, you'll learn more about what to expect during the eclipse, how you can participate, how NASA and government agencies will use the eclipse to advance science, and how to view it safely. Now I'll hand it over to Administrator Nelson to kick us off.
This is Administrator Bill Nelson.
Before we get started, we were supposed to have the Federal Highway Administrator, Shailene Batt, with us this morning. You've probably seen the emergency that's happening in Baltimore.
It's weird that our show is about the shipwreck in Baltimore and the solar eclipse, and Bill Nelson is talking about the Baltimore bridge collapse here. Interesting.
Our thoughts are certainly with them. Our prayers are with the people and the families involved. I've often said that at NASA, our mission is for all humanity, and that's because space brings us together. There's no better proof than moments like this, a total solar eclipse.
He said it, solar ellipse.
Yeah, you'd have to look back in the occultism of the ellipse, because he alluded also to somebody couldn't be there because of the Baltimore event there. So, you know, there's a lot. They're reading. That was definitely messaging there, and you just have to connect the dots, because that's not normal for him. Like, he's so well spoken. Look how polished he is. I mean, he's a spokesman. And that it was so purposeful. Ellipse, like he didn't try to correct after. It doesn't appear to be, but solar ellipse, you know. And look into the occultism now. Perhaps, Ryder, you would know better, because always talking with Wayne Steiger as well. You know, go into the occultism. Are you talking about Ouroboros or something? I mean, the ellipse is what's he getting at here? That was not a mistake. That's on purpose. What I'm seeing and reading right there. Body language, everything's spot on. He's a very elegant speaker and like spot on speaker. That's why he's up at the podium. And notice how he doesn't flinch. Like normally in a body language, you would make a mistake like that, you would flinch, like, oh shit, I made a mistake, But look at him, he just keeps going smoothly. Message delivered, on cue, on point.
It's also interesting too, Dave, that whenever these NASA representatives they hardly ever say outer space. They only say space. He just said it. He just said space. He didn't say outer space. And people take that whenever someone says space, they're automatically referring to outer space when there's so much more space. Anywhere could be more space. Because space could be inside of your head too, like empty space in your room. Like space could be anything. Space could be the ocean. It's just interesting how they say space, and the people that are watching and listening automatically assume that they're meaning outer space when they might not. Because you would think you would want to make that distinction, and they used to. NASA used to make that distinction, but now they don't. Hardly ever. They don't hardly ever say outer space anymore. They just say space. And I think that that's a very interesting observation. All right, let's continue here.
Well, that was a good catch. That didn't even cross my mind until you said that right there. What about the hollow spaces beneath our planet? I mean, these giant cavern systems, etc.
Exactly.
Yeah, the good call on the just saying space, not outer space.
Yeah, it's interesting. Play on words there.
When millions of people across North
Ellipse.
America will look to
Ellipse.
So let's look at the iconography there. If you can hold that slide for a second. Notice the lightning bolt, which would be a plasma. For me, that's more of a plasma filament ripping off the sun there. That top one, that's a plasma filament. And then if you go back, you got to look and see what the occult symbolism is for that kind of devil's forked tongue. That's exactly what I see there. It's a devil's forked tongue that looks like a plasma filament. And then that moon is definitely occultist there. That is, if you're looking at alchemy or some sort of earth worship, that's like the standard symbol for that, for the moon. When you're looking at paganism and thing, that's paganism 101. Earth, moon, sun, sky. Right there you go.
It almost kind of looks like a serpent tongue.
Yeah, it is. That's exactly right. Forked devil tongue. Yeah, serpent tongue. Exactly what. The forked tongue. So now start to put all these pieces together. They're giving the occult symbolism of an ellipse. So for me, an Ouroboros would be the serpent eating its own tail. And then we got obviously a serpent tongue here. And then you stamp that thing with the neo-paganism or some sort of occultism on top of that. Now here you're supposed to be able to see the devil's comet coming up perhaps with this thing as well. So for me, that's just two different points that are electrically arcing off. So there's a lot of strangeness with this. Just if you're looking at the heavens, there's a bunch of strangeness. Now, what they're trying to get everybody to buy into with the fear in this occult ritual that's going to happen at the time. Now, don't delude you. It's an occult ritual happening here. Now, you have to willingly give your fear or your lower vibration energies. You have to willingly give that into the kitty, for a better term, into the pot. They can't take it from you. You have to give it to them. So by allowing all this fear to run around the event, okay, this is strange. It's interesting for me. I like watching solar activity, seeing solar events, checking out comets, these sort of things. Interesting for me, just as a general thing. Looking at the corona of the sun, I'm curious, what we're going to see when this thing. There will be no Nibiru spotted behind there at the thing. Now, that'll catch like 1 or 2% of the people. They'll be biting their fingernails. Nibiru's will be seen when the eclipse comes on. Man, if Nibiru was even close to here, all the planets would be out of their orbits by now. Really, like that's just a no-brainer. And for being in the inner solar system, oh my gosh, like none of us would even be in our own places right now. Like this planet would be tipped over if Nibiru was like in the inner solar system. Oh my gosh. Like the magnetism of another Jupiter inside the inner solar system. Are you kidding me? And I don't care if it's coming from the bottom up through the ecliptic. It would send our planets, all the planets would be out of their orbits by now. And that would be very noticeable. Like everybody would notice that the sun is in the wrong place setting at the wrong time of the day. And like everybody would notice it. So this whole when it's occulted, the disc, and we're going to be able to see Nibiru at the time. I don't think so. I'm just going to say 99.9% on my edge. I don't think so. But there's always that sliver of a possibility, maybe. But what we see this Devil's Comet, forked comet coming off, that'd be pretty interesting too, to see the horns from the comet. Those are 2 electrical discharge points on it, by the way. Not a dirty snowball. So you're looking at double arcing on that discharge off the comet. And we'll see. We'll see. But the fear, it's a fear. And I'm glad you Ryder, that you talked to when we were having a conversation before the show. And I couldn't remember. I was like, man, there was this one other time where they were trying to get everybody super scared of something. And you brought it up to me then, It's that same kind of thing that we experienced before, isn't it?
It's exactly the same thing. It's that emergency broadcast system that everybody was talking about that was going to turn everyone into zombies. It's the exact same thing. It's just a different kind of event, and it's another repeating thing. It's just like the Baltimore bridge collapse with the ship going into it. You got the Evergreen ship. You got this solar eclipse that is happening, where people are doing all this fear mongering around, and all this stuff is going to happen, just like the emergency broadcast system. And it went and it passed and nothing happened. It's the same exact thing. And how often, we have solar eclipses every 18 months, right? They're between 2 and 5 solar eclipses every year, with a total solar eclipse taking place every 18 months. So it's like it's nothing new, and all the community gets in this hype about this stuff, and then it just becomes this fear mongering thing, because people, and it drives clicks, it drives clout in predictions, right? That's what the whole community is based off of, is predictions. Oh, this is going to happen at such and such date down the road, and then it comes, and then nothing ever happens. Everyone has always been wrong. They've never been right. So it's like it's another repeating fear-mongering thing. But I do want to finish up the rest of this gentleman, Bill, NASA representative, talking about this, because it's very interesting. It almost sounds identical to something that you would say, Dave. I think this guy listens to Adapt 2030, maybe. Whenever you hear it, you're going to be like, holy crap, did he just rip me off? Listen real quick.
This is in front and between the sun and the earth. And it's a rare sight that we haven't seen in 7 years. And unusual things start to happen as the normal rhythms of Earth are disrupted. When you're seeing this eclipse, you ought to observe this.
That was interesting right there. But see, people are clipping that section out of this talk, and they're turning it into something that it's not. And if you listen to the rest of the clip, but I've seen several people post just that section on like TikTok and like on Instagram, and using that as evidence of something that's going to happen during the eclipse. But if you listen to the rest of it, which we are right now,
well, let me interject there for a second. I've been through a full solar eclipse that lasted for 5 minutes when I was in China. This many years ago, and everything does get disrupted. Like the nighttime sounds turned on again. Like the crickets started, the frogs started again. Some birds kind of like in the morning time when they wake up and thing. So yeah, the rhythm was disrupted. It disrupted the rhythm of the animals and the insects. Of course it did. But I could tell you that just from being through the eclipse, a really long one. It was like 5 minutes and 13 seconds or so. It was like one of the longest ones that had been in over 100 years. And then here we are. This will be like 4 minutes and some. So it's a rather long one. A lot of them are 2 minutes, 3 minutes. This is actually a very long one, in retrospect compared to most others. So it'll be in the top like 15% of longest ones. But it'll disrupt, and you'll start to hear, if you're there, you'll hear nighttime sounds rock up immediately. It's just so strange how, it gets dark and man, everything turns on instantly. Everything at night just comes on back on again. And then when the light comes back and then turn back to daytime sounds, it's actually amazing to watch nature flip from night to day and night in just minutes. Usually it takes, got to go through the sunset, and then everything will set in after that, and you'll finally get twilight, and it'll get dark, and then things will turn on. But this is like an instant turn on. So be very cognizant and pay very close attention to the sounds you hear of normally what you would consider nighttime sounds. I know we're not in the middle of summer, so it might not be as stark of a change, but just at least listen for the birds, how they change, stop, and a different type of bird will start chirping. It'll be interesting if you can notice those and be aware of these things, of like the sunset, sunrise, changing of the guard types of wildlife, how it's going to flip, boom, boom, in just a couple of minutes. Be cognizant of it, and once you know, and you'll be like, wow, that was crazy how they... But anyway, I digress. Sorry, Lane, go ahead.
That's exactly what he's getting ready to explain. So you already explained it for him. We don't even need to listen to it. No, I'm just joking. We got it here.
As the day appears to turn to dusk and then dark, people have heard birds stop singing. They've seen giraffes suddenly begin to gallop.
Really quickly, though, Dave, where in the United States can you see giraffes galloping?
Zoos.
Oh man, we need to go to the zoo to watch the eclipse, Dave, so we can see the...
Yeah, that'd be
giraffes
mad. I wonder what the
galloping.
monkeys would be doing there too. Like bunch of freaked out orangutans banging around in the exhibit area. Like, what?
I thought that was hilarious. I was like, man, where in the United States are we going to see some wild giraffes galloping during the eclipse? It's just an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, that's
I thought
so
it was funny.
random, isn't it? Like, why would you think you'd put, like, target it more toward a North American species? I don't know.
Roosters start crowing and crickets chirp. So watch for these unusual behaviors. And we encourage you to help NASA observe the sights and sounds around you. Eclipses have a special power.
I think you're right about that, Dave, because he said ellipse first in the beginning of his speech, and then he says the correct pronunciation of it here at the end. He just said eclipse.
But he said it had special power too. So there you go, right into the occultism. Now, again, he didn't tell you what kind of power. He just left it open. Well, if you're looking on the occult side of thing, like eclipses are like some of their high time. You know, you got to talk to Mark Carpenter. He's into the super deep into the ancient invasive hominid species of what we consider the world leaders today on the blood types and the bloodlines and this sort of thing of, you know, what has continued from this invasive destructive species. But they use these types of rituals. Now, I would encourage you also, if you're at an ancient site where there are ley lines, there's going to be rituals going on there too, because up through that whole area, the Mississippian culture, if you go back, say, you know, before the collapse of most of that, circa 600 AD or so, like there's a lot of ancient sites, and a lot of these sites that are on ley line areas will be focal points for a lot of nasty during this time. But, you know, I'd interviewed Mark a couple times, and he was explaining that they use this time to enhance the energies in the spots they're in. Now, can I get somebody's energy of emotion now into that also? So for me, the way he was explaining also on these very largest of events where the energies are going to be the highest to accomplish the goals of whatever during these rituals. It's not in a single location. It's spread out, and usually they're trying to do some sort of sacred geometry in the sites that the people all involved in the same ritual are having, because they're trying to spin the energy. You know, you're thinking about the Hadron Collider, that what are they doing? They're taking the particles and they're spinning them to get them to go faster, and the faster they go, and eventually that momentum of the spin So don't think of it as just a single ritual in one single place. Then that energy is moving and they're trying to get the swing around in it. So, think about going up to like Tikal, or I should say down from where we are, down at Tikal, or some of these places in the Mayan pyramid areas. They're not at just one single complex. They're at a complex 50 miles away. They're at a complex, half a mile away. And if they could line up these different complexes, let's say, like in Tikal, for example, there's 4 or 5 bigger, temples at the complexes there. They wouldn't use just one. There'd be ceremonies on all of the tops of all of those, circulating the energy around a wider spot. And this is the whole thing I'm looking at too. All right, well, they're not going to channel it up and down and make it go like this. What he did give away was it would have to be an ellipse if that energy were to be channeled. Because if you look at that, it would go down the right side and it would be a little bit and come back up again. And there would be some separation between, but it would be like an elongated ellipse. If they were to get all of the energies along these ley line sacred spots that were the Mississippian culture used to be, I bet this thing's going to run right near, the Serpent Mound as well. And it's going to be right all in that area, right? So you got to think about where we're looking at New Madrid fault zone. Not that it's going to go off. I'm just saying right near there, there's a huge amount of, that was the epicenter of, that was the center of the Mississippian cultures and the Cahokia and this sort of thing. So when you're coming up and down there, all these sacred sites from more of the ancients, plus you got Serpent Mound there. So think about running that energy from one place all the way down to Texas and back in this ritual of all the ancient spots on the ley lines at the same times during the ritual as it's passing. It wouldn't be a perfect circle like it would be in Tikal or other places like in Bagan in Myanmar, or some of these other spots where they're running the energies around in circles in the same complexes in the same areas, but in a wider berth. It would have to be an ellipse. He gave it away. Shoot, I can't believe that. I didn't even think about that until I was thinking about circulating energies. It would have to be an ellipse to circulate that energy around, because it wouldn't be a circle. Go figure.
Ellipse.
That's why I said it's going to be very different with these energy here.
Oh, and when you think of, well, it's going to happen on the 8th, right? What is the number 8? The number 8 is an infinity symbol.
Mm-hmm.
It's just looping back.
You had to be a tight 8, but a really elongated 8 coming back and forth, or to be a very elongated elliptical orbit of those energies swirling around as they try to accomplish their goals. Now, I'm curious, sometimes there's a map where you can put one point on the map, and then you can look at the bottom of the globe and see where you'd pop out if you dug a hole, Like along this line, what's below that's on the other side of the planet where you could, because if it's such the big ritual, and it seems like the occultists are at the apex of what they need to do, this would be like probably one of the biggest rituals in the last century, if not millennia. Like, it seems like a lot of energies are lining up, especially with what I'm talking about, the 4 gas giants coming into their electromagnetic perturbation, strangeness, whatever that is going to be here in October of 2024. Now that's starting to line up and really solidify the energies. And all these other things, not that I think that CERN really can crack open the earth and everything, but there's definitely some magnetic resonance around that thing. And to be fired up at the same time is a little quirky. I know if you went through the earth from along the eclipse, each area that it went all the way through the United States, if you were to go on the other side of the planet and look to where those popped out, obviously it's not going to be over in Europe there where the Hadron Collider is, because that's only a third of the spin around the planet. So do a little research on that. Anybody out there, take a look at, are there any sacred spots that are connecting from beneath? Because you know what? It wouldn't be only where the moon is crossing on the eclipse. You could look to see on the bottom of the planet, because they would take that and try to take it right through the center of the planet as well. So think about that. It's like a sewing needle almost going from Texas all the way up through Canada as well. Now think about that sewing needle punching through to the other side of the planet on sacred spots. And I guarantee there'll be people there having ritual as well on the dark side of everything. Because imagine if you could take that sewing punch hole needle all the way through that whole segment of the planet.
It's interesting with CERN as well, because I believe the last time CERN was turned on was in July 4th of 2022. And I remember that date because everyone again was talking about, oh, we're gonna switch timelines. We're gonna jump into an alternate timeline when CERN. See, I just did the whole thing. I just did the Bill thing. I just called it a turn instead of CERN. But they were talking about, oh, well, we're going to jump into an alternate timeline and all this stuff, an alternate reality when CERN turns on July 4th of 2022. So, I mean, nothing happened. So I highly suspect nothing is going to happen with this one as well. But let's finish up this this video here because I want to get into a little bit of more of the occult aspects of this as well, because there's something really interesting that NASA is doing around this solar eclipse that we're going to get into after this video is over.
They move people to feel a kind of reverence for the beauty of our universe. Their power is not only to unify us on Earth, but to further science and discovery. In 1919, Albert Einstein's theory of gravitational bending was proven when scientists measured how stars shift when the sun is blocked out by the moon. And today, over a century later, a total solar eclipse still brings great opportunity in science.
So he was talking about the unification of people during this this solar eclipse, or how he says it, solar ellipse. And I thought that was an interesting aspect of this as well. He's talking about the unification of people.
Depending on the frequency you're putting out. And it's all about frequency and holding state. Because I was watching this interview from a guy who was living in Bali in the 1970s, you know, before Jerry Lopez and all these guys got down there. And right when that hardcore surf group kicked up in Uluwatu and stuff in the 70s. But they were interviewing him and he's like, yeah, you know, the locals here who are having their rituals at their temples kept the vibration in check, and the whole area kept that vibrational frequency based on what those people were doing at the temples for their ceremonies also, of keeping that vibration at a certain level. And he was saying, you know, the same thing, that they were doing these types of ceremonies at all the temples on the same days, and the vibrational frequency across the island would remain in the same. And he said he could still feel it today, but it's not at the level that it used to be. And he's like, this place is timeless because they still keep these ceremonies going on. Now, if he's, you know, directly correlating that to something where he's saying that they're doing ceremony across the island to bring the vibrational frequency and harmony again, and that's what, including the people, then what is this thing going to do if they're going to try to take the fear-based frequency or the lower vibrational frequencies and connect and tap all those together? It's truly the same thing, but just on a different level of frequency.
So there's another lady that pops up in this NASA conference and follows up on what Bill was talking about with the scientific exploration of the total solar eclipse happening on the 8th. And this is what she says.
Thank you, Al-Sayed. Good morning. My name is Kelly Korick, and I am the NASA Eclipse Program Manager, excited to discuss the ways NASA is using the solar eclipse for scientific discovery. In addition to our over 20 satellites in NASA's Heliophysics System Observatory that regularly observe the sun, we'll be using rockets, planes, and balloons, and on-the-ground observations to optimize the science return of the eclipse.
Rockets, planes, and balloons, Dave. They're going to be shooting rockets into the eclipse on the 8th. NASA is launching 3 rockets into the solar eclipse next week. 3 rockets. And they're going to shoot it into the eclipse to study it for
I
scientific.
don't think that's
purposes.
possible. I just don't think how you can't launch it into the eclipse. The eclipse is the result of the moon passing in front of the sun. So how do you launch anything into the eclipse? That makes no sense to me.
Well, they're saying that they're going to launch it into the shadow, the direct shadow of the eclipse. The headline is a little misleading. It says they're going to launch it into the solar eclipse, not really into it, but into the shadow of the solar eclipse to study the effects upon Earth. And I'm like, what is more American than shooting rockets into the eclipse, baby? Blow it up. That's the answer. Says here, ultraviolet radiation from the sun routinely pries away electrons from the atoms, forming abundant electricity-charged particles that puff up the upper atmosphere. It thins out upon sunset, and these ions recombine the neutral atoms, only to be ripped apart again next dawn. If you think that
Wait,
the
are they
ion,
talking about atmosphere expanding or contracting during this time?
that is part of the study, is to study the atmosphere with these rockets that they're shooting into it. The sudden transition from day to night is known to cause sharp drops in temperatures and even trick animals into engaging in nighttime behaviors. But the scientists understand little about how brief moments of darkness influence the boundary between Earth's upper and lower atmosphere, called the ionosphere, which extends
That's the
55.
electrical boundary.
Yep. But I thought that was I thought it was funny at first.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. A lot of weirdness around this. They were never concerned about this before, and it's the first time they're launching rockets up there to try to understand the boundary layer there and see what the millivolt charge changes during an eclipse. Is this the first time they've ever thought of that? And I mean, well, you told me something. So I forgot the name of the rockets. I know one of them was Ra, as in the Egyptian god Ra. What were the other two names of the rockets?
I would have to let me see if they say it in this article, but they're all named after gods, just like all of NASA's programs have always been named after gods. So it's nothing really new. They've always done that. Apollo, Gemini, all of their test flights and a lot of their projects have all been named after gods since the inception of NASA. So let me try and find the other ones. I knew that one of them was named Ra, yeah.
Yeah, because putting the rockets up there, are they trying to obscure something with the vapor trails there? Or because from our ground view, shooting a vapor trail up there during that time is going to be very much like a contrail, like in a persistent contrail. Once it gets up in that, you're going to watch that thing like layer out, so they're going to block the view for a few people.
Well, and then also, if something strange could be seen, they could just be blamed on NASA rockets.
Just interesting how this bombing of the Iranian embassy ties up with this at the same time. So, like, walk through me with the mind experiment here. Like before this event, when we were talking, Ryder and myself here, this bombing of the Iranian embassy had not occurred yet. So keep in mind, this ritual here, this is a destructive energy ritual, Kali, and the energy of destruction in this ritual for the elitists, that's what it's all about. Trying to harvest this, create fear. And again, what will they do with all this energy that's willingly given to them from humanity? And how wide of an area can they encompass and use this energy? But before this Iranian thing, it was just over the eclipse area that was this like energy harvesting / occultist ritual area. But now imagine if the war kicks off in the exact same time or days, that adds to that fear or like negative vibration that's baked into this ritual. But then you would have to look triangulating it. Then if we go from where we, let's say like the New Madrid fault zone, we use that, boom, as the center dot there, Missouri, right at the end of Missouri, you get that little boot heel there, right there. We'll use that as the the center point of, say, the American event, and then we'll swing way over into the Middle Eastern event, and we'll mark it right there at Israel. But then there would have to be a third triangulation point somewhere over here in Asia also. And I bet they'd be pretty damn equidistant between themselves as well. So then you'd have to look where the third point is and what, again, the triangulation, because if you're going to try to punch hole sacred spots through the planet and match them up on the other side and do rituals coming through the planet to harvest energy, then would it not make sense to encompass it around the planet equidistant and have it rotating around the planet? So it's almost like it's rotating in three on XYZ axis on this thing, where you're going under the planet itself, like literally through the middle of the planet on a plane. Then you have the ellipse that would be, that either the figure 8 or the full ellipse itself on the surface, which would be another axis plane. And then if it were to be a third point on the other side of the globe, then they would have the full spinning from, what you consider like an orbit around the planet. Let's say the equator, for example, is a good, or 60 degrees north or 40 degrees north, they would just spin around the planet at there. So you'd have that crossing through the planet, the ellipse on surface, north and south, and then the running of the circle around that 60 degree, 40 degree north latitude thing going on. So if you're going to try to do some sort of ritual and pull energies at the time, you got the XYZ axis going on. I just need to find that third point over in Asia where they might try to tick something off to cause more fear.
I can't find the names of the rockets, but this is from NASA's official website. NASA to launch sounding rockets in the moon's shadow during solar eclipse. NASA will launch 3 sounding rockets during the total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024 to study how the Earth's upper atmosphere is affected when sunlight momentarily dims over the portion of the planet. They're going to be launched from Virginia. The sounding rockets will launch at 3 different times, 45 minutes before, during, and 45 minutes after the peak local eclipse. These intervals are important to collect data on how the sun's sudden disappearance affects the ionosphere, creating disturbances that have had the potential to interfere with our communications. So, no.
At least that's a better headline. That sums it up way better than just like the generic CNN one. They're going to shoot it into the eclipse. Now, personally, a couple of things from my end. I do not think there's going to be a giant 8.0 earthquake on the New Madrid fault zone. That's a shadow. It's a shadow. Now, maybe some random either events would cause something a year or two later, and I know if there is, people will go, "Oh, it was the eclipse. It's been exactly 718 days because the 7 minus the 1 is 6 plus the 8, or something like this, or the 7 plus the 1 is 8, and then 8, and then add those two together is 16, and it's a 7. See, I knew because they'll do something like this, like 2 years after the event, to try to connect it back where there's no connection. But to come on out and say there's going to be a big quake there because of the eclipse, and then there's supposed to be, I don't know. I heard some crazy stuff about the eclipse. This is what I don't get. It's like you're allowed to run on social media and blare out any ridiculousness and not any culpability there. Nobody holds your feet to the fire after the event, and nothing comes to fruition.
Yep.
Right? But it's all about the fear. Notice the fear that surrounds this one. It's almost like these influencers are in on the ritual. Not everybody. I'm just saying some that are pushing the fear super hard. Like, why is this fear being pushed so hard into this thing? And it's XYZ, they're going to spray spray some kind of Marburg, bird flu, something from planes. There's emergencies. Interestingly, though, Indiana just declared a state of emergency because of all the people coming into the eclipse. And because they did, and somewhere else, there's 2 or 3 other places have done that, already declared states of emergency, that they're going to say, see, they're planning to call out the National Guard and lock everybody down in those same minutes of the eclipse. I mean, the amount of fear surrounding this thing is exactly what the elite wants you to do, willingly give your negative emotion into their ritual. They're getting you to do the dirty work for them, and every pun intended, because they need to harvest your low vibrational frequency field. in on their ritual. And the more influencers that are out there talking, fear and ridiculousness that won't manifest, in my personal opinion, the more they get everybody on board with this fear-based thing. So the more afraid people versus 10 million or 100 million, their ritual on the outcome, however they're going to harvest these energies, I don't know. They're harvested, but what comes after that? What's the purpose? How do they utilize this vibration that they've captured? And I really believe it's captured. Now, and then everybody's, even then there's more influencers and more news and more this and more that. And it's just like, I don't know, this fear needs to stop around this event here of all this conjecture of, like we talked about, the 5G towers are going to go off and turn everybody into a zombie type of thing. That just needs to cease. You're feeding the demon that we're trying to stop.
Yep.
We need to take our world back, and all the influencers are feeding the demon that's now being able to solidify a tighter grip on our planet. Stop it. Truly stop.
That is perfect, and I agree 100%. They blow all of these events out of proportion. They get on there and they just talk about a bunch of nonsense and get everybody wrapped up in things that no one should be worrying about in the first place. But it drives clicks, it drives people to their channel, and all the while it's really covering up the things that we actually need to be worrying about. And just for people that think that this is a rare eclipse, it's not. Every 18 months, there are between 2 and 5 solar eclipses each year, with a total eclipse taking place every 18 months or so. Total solar eclipses are seen every 400 years from any one place on the surface of the Earth. This is not a rare event. It happens all the time. It might not happen all the time in the United States, but for somewhere in the world, there's a solar eclipse happening. That's what people need.
Yeah, you can find the forecast for those too. They show you every single one for the whole year. Every one, even the lunar eclipses.
We've had quite a few lunar eclipses in. I think we had like 3 last year or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but there was quite a few lunar eclipses last year. So it's nothing rare. It happens all the time. So all the fear and all the nonsense propaganda that's surrounding it in the community is just that. It's just fear and nonsense propaganda. And you're totally right, Dave. Whenever someone makes these exaggerated predictions about stuff like this, then no one ever comments on it after it doesn't happen. They never call them out. They're never like, oh, well, it's just on to the next thing. They just shuffle on to the next thing. It's like the Lionsgate thing that happens every year in August. All the spiritual community and the New Agers all talking about, oh, it's the Lionsgate portal that's opening. Like, did you guys not just remember last year? They were saying the exact same thing. They said it only happens once in a lifetime. They just said that same thing last year and the year before and the year before that. It's the same thing every year.
But it grabs your attention, doesn't it?
Really does, Dave. And I want to thank you for coming on. I know we ran over a little bit here today, and I know you're really tired. It's super late where you are, but I appreciate you a lot for coming on.
Oh, man, it's a 24-hour world. It's only 3:15. We're good. I got my radio show, by the way, if anybody wants to check it out, my radio show tomorrow. Well, it's tonight at your time, 10 p.m. to Eastern. Ransom Godwin, Many Ice Age Conversations over on Revolution Radio. I'll be up at 7 doing my show notes. If anybody wants to hit us up, and go to oilseedcrops.org, and you can sign up for our weekly wrap up of the show notes, just 10 bullet points of what we talked about in the show, so you can start conversations, send people their own set of breadcrumbs to start nibbling on there. And then also for you to do some of your own research, because we try to put the keywords and tags of things that we talked about with specific wordage in there. So, or terms, for a better term. So you can go off and then do more research on your own. And that's absolutely free. It's just 10 bullet points that we put up of our show. excuse me. So I'll have that up probably around 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. your time tomorrow. So going to be getting ready for breakfast here in a minute. I guess we'll call it an all-nighter. I'm just going to keep going. So it's all good.
Like you were 20 years old again, Dave. Bringing
Hell
back
yeah.
that spunk.
Pump out the techno and hit the modafinil, and there we go, man.
Dose up on a large percentage of caffeine, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, Dave. Thanks everyone in the chat. I really appreciate you. All the links to Dave's information will be in the description of this video. How's it going, Lost in Space? Mike, Rick, good to see you. Lynn, No Bull Truth, Gray Arena, good to see you guys. Thanks for being here, everyone. Scotty Boy, Nance.
Oh wait,
Marissa.
what's the name? Larry, Moe, and Curly were the name of the Rockets.
Yeah. Scotty Boy.
That's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. Classic. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the algorithm. Share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. The links to all of my information is also in the description of this video. And become a Ryder Ranger channel member today and get that bonus episode tomorrow. And if you're already a Ryder Ranger channel member, it will pop up in your feed. If you're not, check the community tab page of the channel. Okay. Hope you guys have a great weekend starting tomorrow. Well, I guess Friday is technically a weekend. Weekend starts at 4 p.m. on Friday, right?
420.
4:20, baby, on Friday starts
On
the
the
weekend.
dial.
All right, guys. See you all soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.